All right, so we're diving deep today, folks. You guys have sent in some really, really fascinating stuff. Local histories, folklore, modern-day accounts, and they all revolve around a mystery that just won't quit here in the American Southwest.
Yeah.
The Verde Treasure conspiracy theories. And our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to kind of get under the skin of this whole idea that there's hidden treasure in Arizona's Verde Valley, specifically using what you've sent us. We're going to break down the main beliefs, the alleged evidence, what the skeptics say, and even why a story like this captures people's imaginations for so long.
I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of look at the evolution of this. I mean, we have a lot of different sources.
Yeah.
It's fascinating right from the beginning how a local legend like this starts to grow. It weaves together historical facts and local gossip and this very human need to believe in something more, something hidden.
Right. Yeah.
There's a real power in that kind of mystery.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get to the heart of this Verde Treasure narrative, pulling from the common threads and everything you guys have shared with us. And one thing that jumps out is that this story doesn't seem to exist in isolation.
Right.
It's almost always connected to the Lost Dutchman's gold mine story.
Right.
Which, of course, is like the granddaddy of lost treasure tales in the Southwest.
Oh, absolutely.
It's almost like the Dutchman's story gives permission for people to believe in other lost treasures in the area. And your materials definitely point to this belief that there's not just one treasure in the Verde Valley, but potentially multiple caches hidden away.
Yeah, that connection to the Dutchman's legend, it's really important.
Right.
It sets the scene, It makes it easier to believe in this idea of significant undiscovered wealth in the area. And your sources are pretty consistent about what this treasure is, mainly gold. But there's also this intriguing possibility of valuable artifacts, too.
Right, like religious items or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Things hidden away somewhere in the Verde Valley. And what I find really interesting is that the estimated size of this treasure varies so much.
Yeah.
In your materials, it ranges from like small bags of gold found by prospectors to these almost mythical hoards of wealth.
Right.
And I think this actually makes the legend even more resilient.
How so?
Well, the smaller amounts, they keep it grounded, make it seem possible.
Right.
While the bigger, more exaggerated amounts, those fuel the more romantic aspects of the myth, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like it keeps everyone happy.
Exactly. There's something there for everyone to latch onto.
Right. It's a very flexible legend, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is where it gets really, really interesting.
Oh.
And it's something that comes up a lot in what you've shared with us, this whole idea of secret guardians. There seems to be this belief that there's a specific group of people, maybe an ancient society or descendants of the original hiders, who are actively protecting this treasure. And some of your sources even suggest that this protection can be, well, let's just say forceful.
Oh, wow.
To discourage anyone who gets too close.
Yeah, that element of guardianship, it definitely adds intrigue to the narrative.
Right.
And maybe even a little bit of danger, when you look at broader patterns in conspiracy theories, this idea of a chosen group possessing secret knowledge and keeping it hidden, it's a recurring theme.
Yeah.
And it takes the Verde treasure beyond just lost gold. It becomes a secret entrusted to a chosen few, and that can be very attractive to people who feel like they're on the outside of mainstream narrative.
Right, yeah, the people in the know.
Yeah.
And that sense of secrecy, it kind of naturally flows into another big part of the story that comes up in your materials, the suppression of information.
Oh, interesting.
This idea that local authorities or even powerful individuals know more about the treasure than they're letting on. And your material suggests they might be keeping quiet for several reasons.
What kind of reasons?
Well, maybe to protect their own interests or to maintain control over the region. It's that classic idea that there's more to the story than meets the eye.
Yeah, I see. A deliberate cover-up.
Exactly. Now, for anyone who's ever dreamed of striking it rich, this next part is really key.
Okay.
Your sources are full of references to signs and clues.
Oh, interesting.
It seems the whole Verde treasure lore is just overflowing with talk of unusual rock formations, ancient petroglyphs, even old historical documents that people interpret as maps or pointers to the treasure's location.
Oh, wow.
It really highlights how much interpretation is involved in keeping this legend alive.
It does. What's What's really fascinating is how ordinary things like landscape features or historical artifacts can take on this extraordinary significance. To believers, a uniquely shaped rock, it isn't just, the result of natural processes.
Wait.
It becomes a marker, placed there centuries ago.
Right.
A petroglyph. It's not just ancient art. It's a coded message, this kind of selective interpretation where existing things are given new meaning, within the context of this treasure hunt. It's a hallmark of so many mysteries and belief systems that just won't go away.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. It's like a puzzle that people are constantly trying to solve.
Yeah. And finally, because no good treasure legend is complete without a touch of the spooky, the Verde Treasure, as it's described in your materials, is often linked to curses and danger. We see stories of people experiencing bad luck, even going mad or dying when they get too close to the treasure. It's like the treasure has its own defense mechanism to keep itself hidden.
Yeah, that element of a curse, it comes up in different forms throughout your sources. And it probably serves a few different purposes.
Like what?
Well, for one, it can scare off casual treasure hunters.
Right, yeah.
It also reinforces this idea of powerful, maybe even supernatural guardians protecting the treasure. Of course, it adds a layer of drama to the whole story.
Right.
It makes it more exciting, more compelling.
Yeah, and it provides a reason why, despite all the attempts, the treasure hasn't been found yet.
Right.
Maybe those who tried before, they just fell victim to these curses.
Exactly. The curse becomes a convenient explanation for the lack of success.
All right. So we've looked at the core beliefs about the Verde Treasure based on what you've sent us. But what about the evidence?
Yeah.
What do believers actually point to as proof that this is more than just a campfire story being passed around the Verde Valley?
Well, the evidence, as your sources show, it's mostly interpretation rather than hard facts. A lot of it comes from old stories and legends, like accounts from early prospectors or settlers who mentioned lost riches in the Verde Valley.
Right.
The problem, and this is something that skeptics often point out, is that these accounts are usually secondhand.
Right.
They lack detail, and they might have been exaggerated over time as they were passed down.
Like a historical game of telephone.
Exactly.
Yeah. That makes sense. And then there are the geographical anomalies that keep coming up in your sources.
Oh, like what?
Hidden caves, abandoned mines, strange rock formations, all presented as potential hiding spots for the treasure.
Yeah, and while the Verde Valley definitely has these kinds of features, linking them directly to a hidden treasure, that's a big jump.
Right.
That's based on assumption, not actual proof. And geologists often have perfectly natural explanations for these formations.
Right.
It highlights how we as humans tend to look for patterns even when they might not be there. And when you're caught up in the excitement of a treasure hunt, it's easy to see meaning in ordinary things.
Yeah. And what about those ancient markings, the petroglyphs?
Right.
People seem to interpret those as potential maps to the treasure.
They do, but it's important to consider the perspective of archaeologists. They study these petroglyphs within their historical and cultural context. And saying that they're treasure maps from centuries ago, that's a big leap.
Yeah.
And it's usually driven more by the desire to find the treasure than by actual scientific analysis.
So it's wishful thinking.
In a way, yes.
Your collection also includes some very personal stories, testimonies from people who claim to have had strange experiences, close encounters, things like that, connected to the Verde Treasure. Even if they're hard to verify, those would be pretty powerful for believers, can't they?
Oh, absolutely. They appeal to our emotions,
Right.
But from a critical standpoint, these stories often lack evidence to back them up.
Right.
And they can be influenced by suggestion, misinterpretation, or even, in some cases, people making things up.
Right, yeah.
It reminds us how strong the power of belief can be.
Yeah.
And how we tend to find meaning in things that are unusual or hard to explain.
And of course, we can't forget the classic element of so many conspiracy theories, which is present in your materials as well.
Yeah.
Suppressed documents.
Oh, yeah. The idea that there are records out there that would prove the treasure exists, but they're being hidden.
Exactly.
That's a very common thread in conspiracy theories. It explains why there's no definite proof. The evidence is there, it's just being kept secret. And that makes it hard to debunk the theory because the lack of evidence is seen as proof of a cover-up.
Right, right. It's a very circular kind of logic.
Exactly. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Finally, and this is a bit of a darker side to your sources, there's mention of unsolved disappearances of people who went looking for the treasure in the Verde Valley.
Oh, wow.
And this is sometimes presented as evidence of something sinister going on, maybe the work of those secret guardians we talked about earlier.
That's a very serious claim. And while these disappearances are definitely tragic, connecting them directly to a hidden treasure conspiracy requires a huge leap in logic.
Right.
The Verde Valley is a large and often dangerous place. People can get lost, get injured, or die from exposure to the elements.
Right, yeah.
So while it's natural to want to find an explanation, blaming these incidents on a secret treasure and its protectors ignores more likely explanation.
Right, like accidents or just getting lost.
Exactly.
So we've looked at what believers in the Verde Treasure point to as evidence.
Mm-hmm.
But let's flip it around. What are the main arguments against the Verde Treasure conspiracy?
The main criticism, which you'll find in a lot of the skeptical sources you sent, is that there's simply no verifiable evidence.
Mm-hmm.
The whole theory is based on stories, speculation, and often, imaginative interpretations of vague clues.
Right.
There's no real artifact or confirmed location that's been definitively linked to this treasure.
Okay. And what about those historical stories that believers use as evidence?
The skeptics are very critical of those. They point out that folklore and oral histories change over time.
Right.
What might have started as a small story about a prospector losing a small amount of gold can turn into a grand tale of hidden riches over time.
Right, yeah. The story gets bigger and better with each retelling.
Exactly. It's just how legends evolve.
And science plays a role in debunking the Verde Treasure as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. Geologists can explain those strange rock formations using natural processes like erosion.
Mm,
Archaeologists can look at petroglyphs and show that they have nothing to do with hidden treasure.
right.
Science offers a way to understand these things without resorting to extraordinary claims.
It's all about using what we know about the world to explain things.
Exactly.
Now, it seems like psychology also plays a big role in why people believe in the Verde Treasure.
Oh, definitely. The idea of finding hidden treasure, it's very powerful. It appeals to our sense of adventure and the possibility of getting rich.
Yeah.
And this can make people see patterns and connections that aren't really there.
Right, like seeing a treasure map in a random rock formation.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's the sheer size of the Verde Valley itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if there was a treasure hidden somewhere, finding it in such a vast area would be almost impossible.
It's a logistical nightmare. Even with clues, the effort involved in searching such a large and difficult terrain would be enormous.
Right, yeah. It makes you realize how unlikely the whole thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So we've considered the arguments for and against the Verde Treasure.
Mm-hmm.
But let's dig a little deeper into why this story is so persistent. What psychological and sociological factors are at play here?
Well, as we've mentioned, the possibility of getting rich is a big motivator.
Right.
It's a chance to escape financial problems, to achieve a level of wealth that most people only dream of.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly appealing.
And there's the excitement of the hunt itself. It's like a real-life puzzle with a huge potential reward.
Exactly. It speaks to our curiosity, our desire to explore,
Mm-hmm.
and even if the chances of finding the treasure are slim, the act of searching, the anticipation, can be rewarding in itself.
Right.
It's the journey, not just the destination.
And your sources also talk about this feeling of having secret knowledge, of being in the know
Yeah.
about something that most people aren't.
Oh yeah, that's an important factor. Believing in the Verde Treasure, especially the conspiracy aspects, it can make people feel special.
Right.
Like they're part of a select group who knows the truth.
And that sense of belonging, it can be very powerful.
It is. It reinforces their belief and encourages them to share the story with others who might also be open to it.
And the distrust of authority that we mentioned earlier, that plays a role too, doesn't it?
It does. When you're skeptical of official stories, the idea that the government is hiding something as big as a treasure, it seems more believable.
Right, yeah.
It feeds into a general distrust of authority figures and institutions.
And we can't forget about the influence of popular culture.
Oh, right.
Movies, books, TV shows, they've all romanticized treasure hunting.
They have. They often show it as this exciting adventure where ordinary people can make incredible discoveries.
Right.
And that definitely contributes to the appeal of real-life treasure legends like the Verde Treasure.
It makes it all seem more exciting, more attainable. So, with all this talk about hidden gold and adventure, we need to consider the real-world dangers.
Oh, right.
What are some of the risks involved in actually going after the Verde treasure?
Well, your sources highlight a few. The most obvious one is the potential for financial ruin.
Right.
People can spend a lot of money on equipment, trips, research, all based on very flimsy clues and with no guarantee of finding anything.
Yeah, it's a big gamble.
It is. And as we've discussed, the Verde Valley itself can be dangerous.
Right.
It's a harsh environment with extreme temperatures, the risk of dehydration, and potential encounters with wild animals.
Right.
People who aren't prepared for those conditions can easily get into trouble.
Yeah, it's not a place to be wandering around unprepared.
It's not. And the intense focus on finding the treasure can also be isolating.
Right.
People can become so obsessed that they neglect their relationships, their jobs, their health, everything else in their lives.
Right, the treasure becomes the only thing that matters.
Exactly. And that can have very serious consequences.
And we also need to consider the potential damage to the environment.
Oh, right. Unregulated digging and exploration can harm the delicate desert ecosystem. It can disrupt plant and animal life and even damage archaeological sites.
Right, yeah.
And those sites might have nothing to do with the treasure, but they're still important.
And then there's the problem of misinformation. With so many stories and rumors circulating, people can be misled by fake maps, made-up clues, exaggerated tales, and that can lead them into dangerous situations.
It can. It's like a recipe for disaster.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Verde treasure conspiracy, it's clear from everything you've sent us that this legend is a fascinating mix of history, folklore, and human imagination.
It really is. It shows how much we're drawn to the idea of hidden riches and adventure,
Yeah.
even when there's no real evidence to support it.
And it's a good reminder that we need to be critical thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
We need to balance our sense of wonder with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Right. It's okay to be curious and fascinated by these stories, but we also need to be realistic.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
But you know, what I find really intriguing is why these kinds of stories are so popular across cultures and throughout history,
Oh, yeah.
even when there's no concrete proof. What is it about hidden treasure that captures our imagination so much?
That's a great question. What is it about the possibility of uncovering a secret that's so appealing?
Yeah. Why are we so drawn to these mysteries?
It's something to think about.
It is. Now, we want to hear from you, our listeners. What do you think about the Verde treasure legend? Based on what you've learned, what parts of the story do you find most interesting?
Right.
What seems believable and what seems far-fetched?
What are your thoughts?
Share your interpretations of this mystery. We're always eager to hear your perspectives.